This program is to show you how to use checkboxes in live code. You'll notice that I've brought on 3 checkboxes by just dragging them on like this. And I've named each one individually, so I'll just double click on here and the property inspector comes up. And you'll notice that the name of this checkbox, which is still of type button, is starter. And I've also labelled it starter because sometimes it's handy to be able to talk about the label of a button. And I've done the same with main course and also dessert. So I'll just do that. I'm going to copy that. That's Control C, Control V, and then I'm going to do Control S, which saves the program, and it also compiles it into binary machine code so that we can run the program. I've put on a label, one of these things here, and I changed the contents to say total cost of meal, and I've got a field here that I call cost of meal, and that's where I'm going to put obviously the cost of the meal. Now I need to initialize the total cost of the meal at the start of the program. So what I've done, what I'm going to do is on the card script, so I went right clicked on there, edit card script, or I can go up to object and object script, card script, so I can choose their card script, and I'm going to put 0 into, now I'm going to have a variable called total cost that's going to carry the total cost of the meal. I'm just going to press tab, that will line up or indent the lines correctly. So I'm double clicking on here, Control C, Control V, and I'm just going to put in a comment to say that this is a real variable storing the total cost of the meal, which might seem a bit of overkill, but what you try and do always, especially as your programs get longer, is make them as readable as possible, and one way you can do that is to put internal commentary, and you can also use meaningful variable names. So I've put 0 into total cost, and now I want to put that total cost into the field so that I can see it. So field, and if you remember, this was called cost of meal. So let's just see if that works. I'll compile it again, so Control S saves and compiles. So when I click on the card, you'll notice that says on mouse up, so when I click on the card I'll see 0 come up in the field. I could also put on open card, end open card, and that would mean that when the card gets opened, i.e. when you open up the program, it would put 0 in. Now I want to make sure that these all start off unchecked, so I'm going to say set the highlight of button, and if you remember, this is actually, let's bring this over here, this object here is a button called starter. It just happens to be of type checkbox. So the highlight of button starter to false, and I'll need to do that for the main course and the dessert. So once again, Control S, compiles and saves. Now let's go across to the button for starter and put some code on there, and I'll need to carry that variable total cost across to that button so that they can be talking about the same total cost. So I'm going to copy that line, go onto this button, and I'm going to paste this in here. And just while we're on this line, when I say that a variable is a real variable, what I'm really saying is that there's a storage location in RAM that's called total cost, and I'm intending to put real values in it, so that they're numbers like 4.56, 6.72. They're numbers that have a fractional part. Now, on this button it says if the highlight of me, well, we're on that button, so me is that button, is true, then what I want to do is to add on the price of the starter to total cost. So I'm going to put, now let's say the starters are £3.45, so I'll put £3.45 plus my total cost into total cost. And that is called a running total. There's a running total for total cost, and what I've done is I've added that onto it, and it's gone back into total cost to make a running total. And then I want to put my total cost into the field so that I can see it. So let's just go back to the card and let's copy that. But I think before I copy it, I'm actually going to put in a pound sign. So put a pound, and I know from experience it's quite nice to have a space after it, so I'm going to put quotes. And the ampersand, that symbol there, allows me to stick these two things together, these two objects, that little string and that variable, the value from that variable. And the proper term for that is concatenate. So let's just copy that, and I'm going to go onto my button starter, and I'll press tab just to line these up. And that's another feature of programming. If you want to make your programs readable, you can use internal commentary, meaningful variable names, and good use of indentation and white space, just to make it very well laid out and readable. So let's just see if that works. I'll click on the card, and you'll notice I get a pound sign and 0. And when I check the starter so that the highlight goes true, it goes up to 345. Now, if I decided I didn't want a starter, so if I uncheck that, at the moment nothing is happening. It says if the highlight of me is true, then I add it on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that and paste it in there, so that if they decide not to have a starter, I can deduct the 345 again. So I'm going to have to move this around here and say total cost minus 345, so that it goes back off again. So let's see if that works. I'll save and compile and set that back to 0, add on a starter, and then hopefully if I uncheck it, it goes away again. Well, I'll stop there, but you can probably imagine that you'd have much the same sort of code on main course and on dessert. And you may even want to know how many items. So you might want to bring on a field where you say that you've had 2 items, or just 1 item, or all 3 items. And in that case, in here, every time you choose one, you would have to add 1 to some kind of counter. And then similarly down here, if you decide not to have it, you would subtract 1 or put counter minus 1 back into counter. You probably in live code you can say subtract 1 from counter. This line here could be written as put counter plus 1 back into counter. So that's a way that you can count up how many times or how many checkboxes have been ticked. That's the end.